I should have never opened that file. It still screams in my head, even now as I try to talk about it. It doesn't matter if my speakers are unplugged, if my laptop is smashed into 100 pieces, if I close my eyes and cover my ears with both hands. The screaming is still there. Low at first, like the faint hiss of static, then rising, warping into a voice that knows exactly how to pierce through silence and lodge itself in my skull. This isn't just a story. I need you to understand that before you keep listening. This isn't some creepypasta I made up after watching too many late night horror videos. This is a warning, because the thing I opened, the diary, doesn't just belong to me anymore. Once it starts screaming, it doesn't stop. The first time I heard it, I thought it was interference, maybe some glitchy audio hidden in the file. You've probably seen stuff like that before: weird ARG projects, haunted YouTube uploads, files that feel too real, but always turn out fake. I wanted it to be like that. I needed it to be like that. But fake files don't make your ears bleed. They don't whisper your name between lines of static. They don't laugh when you shut your laptop and throw it across the room. And the worst part, the diary waits. It knows when you've read too much, when you're about to close it. And that's when it presses its voice against your thoughts, begging you to keep turning the pages. You don't just read it, you hear it. You feel it in your teeth, in the back of your throat, in your bones. I've tried everything. Headphones, speakers, muting my system entirely. It doesn't care. Once the diary has you, the screaming follows you everywhere. You'll wake up at 3 in the morning to the sound of words you can't quite recognize, but they feel familiar, like they've been waiting for you your entire life. And if you ignore them, the whispers turn to cries. If you still don't listen, they turn to screams. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like I've lost it, like this is nothing more than paranoia twisted into a bedtime horror story. But I wish that were true. I wish I could dismiss this as some late night hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too many hours online. But the diary is real. It's out there. And if you ever find it, don't open it. Don't even look at it. To explain how I got here, I need to start from the beginning. What's the weirdest file you've ever downloaded? A bootleg movie with bad subtitles. Some broken game mod that crashes every time you open it. Maybe one of those cursed videos people share on Reddit. The kind where the comments all say, "Don't watch this at 3 a.m." with a bunch of laughing emojis. For me, chasing down files like that wasn't just a hobby. It was an obsession. I called myself a collector, though most people would probably say I was just reckless. While other people binge, watched Netflix, or played the latest shooter game, I spent my nights digging through online rabbit holes, trying to find the strangest, rarest, most unsettling digital scraps the internet had buried away. It started harmless enough. Lost cartoons ripped from old VHS tapes, beta versions of games that never got released, weird sound files that people swore contained hidden messages. I loved the thrill of it. The idea that behind every badly compressed file or half-broken download, there might be something nobody else had seen. Something forbidden. At first, it was just the surface-level stuff. Shady file sharing sites, ancient torrents with zero-seaters. But soon, that wasn't enough. The stranger the file, the deeper I had to go to find the next one. That's how I ended up haunting forums that only opened at odd hours, places where you had to know someone, or pretend you did, just to get an invite. You'd be surprised how easy it is to slip into those corners of the web. Everyone imagines it like some hacker movie, green text scrolling across the screen, a skull and crossbones warning before you enter the dark web. The truth is, it's quieter than that. Boring, almost ugly pages filled with text, sellers advertising things you don't want to believe are real, fake passports, stolen credit cards, drugs. And then, if you dig long enough, you start to find the other stuff. The files. Some were harmless. Collections of urban legends stitched together into ugly PDFs. Video clips of grainy rituals that were probably staged. But every once in a while, you'd stumble across something stranger, an audio file that claimed to be the last phone call of a missing person. A game mod no one could beat because it changed every time you played. I remember one file, a simple text document that just repeated the same line over and over. It watches while you sleep. Stupid, right? But I still deleted it faster than I care to admit. Most people would have stopped there. They would have laughed, closed their browser, and gone back to normal life. But I wasn't most people. I thrived on that feeling, half excitement, half dread, that came with every click. I kept telling myself it was all fake, just internet theater, but deep down I wanted one of them to be real. I wanted to find the thing nobody else had, the file that didn't just scare me for a night, but followed me long after. And eventually I did. Looking back, I should have noticed the pattern. Every step deeper into those hidden forums, the warnings got louder. People posting in broken English. Don't click this. Dangerous. Sellers disappearing overnight. Threads vanishing like they'd never existed. It was as if something wanted to be found, and at the same time, didn't want to be found at all. That's when I found the listing. It didn't have a flashy name like Cursed Video or Forbidden Game. Just a plain description, personal diary. Voice encoded. Do not listen too long. No screenshots, no preview. Just those words. I should have scrolled past it. God, I should have known better. But my curiosity wasn't wired for restraint. Where most people see a warning, I see an invitation. And that's the moment everything changed. Because what I found wasn't just weird. It wasn't just another piece of digital folklore for me to brag about having downloaded. It was alive. That's when I found the diary. The listing looked different from the others. Most sellers on those forums plastered their ads with grotesque thumbnails or edgy names designed to grab attention. Dull murder tapes, real cult rituals, forbidden VS collection, cheap shock tactics for desperate buyers. But this one was plain all personal diary, voice encoded. Do not listen too long. That was it. No screenshots, no previews, no flashy promises. Just a simple description buried between posts about stolen logins and malware kits. At first, I thought it was a joke. Some inside gag meant to bait gullible people like me, but something about it hooked me. The lack of detail made it worse. It was like being dared to press a red button with no label. I hovered over the page for a long time. My gut told me to close the tab, to forget about it. But my curiosity whispered louder. What if this is the one? I clicked, contact seller. The reply came faster than I expected. A username, Vox Archivist. Their profile was bare, no history, no previous listings. Just a contact button and a warning at the top of their page. Don't ask twice. I typed, is the diary real? For a few minutes, nothing. Then the little chat window blinked. Vox Archivist, it's as real as you are. Me, what's voice encoded mean? Vox Archivist, you'll hear it. That's all you need to know. Vox Archivist, safe. No, nothing worth finding is safe. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could already feel my pulse picking up. Normally, these exchanges went one of two ways. Either the seller spammed you with vague nonsense until you sent crypto, or they ghosted you the moment you asked too many questions. But this was different. The replies felt deliberate, short, heavy. Me, any advice before I buy it? There was a long pause this time. Long enough that I thought maybe I'd pushed too far. Then Vox Archivist, don't listen for too long. It remembers. That line hit me like cold water. I didn't know what it meant, but I couldn't stop staring at it. It remembers. What does that even mean? Files don't remember. They don't care how long you open them. But the way it was phrased, casual final, like someone telling you not to look directly at the sun, sent a chill crawling up my arms. Of course, that only made me want it more. I sent the payment, a ridiculous amount for something that might just be a corrupted audio file. A minute later, I got the download link. The file was small, barely a few megabytes, labeled Diary Final, WAV. No readme, no password, no instructions, just the file, sitting in my downloads folder like it had been waiting for me all along. I stared at it for a long time. Every instinct screamed to leave it alone, to drag it to the trash and empty the bin before it had the chance to do anything. But my curiosity had never let me stop halfway. I needed to know what was inside. I double-clicked, and when I finally opened the file, I realized this wasn't writing at all. At first, I thought it was just badly translated text. When the file opened, my media player showed the track length just over 2 hours. But instead of playing anything, the screen filled with lines of text, like subtitles coded directly into the audio. They scrolled across in jagged bursts, sentences cut off mid, thought half-formed words mashed together, as if the file had been chewed up and spit back out. The entries read like someone's diary, but not in the way you'd expect. There were no dates, no names. Just fragmented memories. Someone talking about growing up in a house with boarded-up windows. Someone describing the way their father's footsteps echoed through the hall when he was drunk. A paragraph about peeling wallpaper in a bedroom where the walls sometimes whispered back. It should have been boring. Just the ramblings of a damaged person, maybe even AI-generated garbage. But the more I scrolled, the heavier the air around me felt. Like reading the words wasn't passive, it was participatory. As if every confession was meant to drag me deeper into the author's head. Then, about 10 minutes in, I heard it. Not the screams, not yet, just a sound. Faint, like when you think you hear someone breathing behind you, but it's only the fridge. My speakers were off. I even checked twice. But the sound was still there. Slow inhales, shallow exhales, syncing with the text on the screen. I froze. It was one of those moments where your brain fights itself. Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut. But the other part, the reckless part, leaned closer, straining to hear more. The breathing grew louder the further I read. At first, I convinced myself it was my imagination, my mind filling in the blanks after staring too long at grim words. But then came the whispers. Not words I could understand, at least not yet, just murmurs woven beneath the diary entries. Like someone crouched inches from the microphone, hissing syllables in a language I didn't know. I swear I could feel the warmth of the breath through my headphones. I paused the file. The whispers stopped. My room was silent, except for the pounding of my own heartbeat. I stared at the frozen text on the screen, half expecting it to start moving again on its own. When I unpaused, the whispers resumed instantly, like they had been waiting for me to come back. That was when I started doubting myself. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe the audio was just a trick, a subliminal track layered under the text to mess with listeners. Plenty of internet trolls had pulled off worse. But here's the thing, subliminal whispers don't change tone when you mutter something under your breath. Because I tested it. Stupid, I know. But curiosity makes you reckless. While the diary whispered, I whispered back, "Who are you?" The whispers paused, just for a second. Then they picked up again. Faster now, sharper, as if suddenly excited. That's when my stomach dropped. I leaned back in my chair, every muscle in my body tense. For the first time since opening the file, I felt like I wasn't alone, like someone or something was aware of me. I told myself it was coincidence, audio artifacts, nothing supernatural. But the longer I listened, the harder that was to believe. Some of the murmurs began to form shapes in my mind. Not words I could repeat, not yet, but patterns, intent. The text on the screen blurred. My eyes stung, and I realized I'd been holding my breath without noticing. I closed the player, my hand trembling on the mouse. But even with the file shut, the faintest echo of those whispers lingered in my ears, like a phantom aftertaste. I wanted to believe it was over, that I'd imagined it, that once I powered down the laptop, silence would return. But when I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I swore I heard soft breathing coming from the corner of my room. The same rhythm, the same cadence. The diary was still with me, and then the screaming started. The first time it screamed, I almost threw up. I'd gone back to the file the next night, thinking maybe I'd imagined the whispers. Curiosity does that. It rewrites your fear into excuses. I told myself maybe I was just tired. Maybe I misheard it. Maybe I wanted it to be more than it was. But when I hit play, the diary didn't whisper this time. It shrieked. It wasn't a sound that belonged in any audio file. My speakers erupted with a jagged, metallic roar, like every voice I'd ever heard screaming at once. Warped through static, shredded into something inhuman. The volume meter on my screen spiked so violently I thought my laptop would fry itself. Imagine your laptop trying to exercise itself. That's the only way I can describe it. The screen flickered, text scrambled across the subtitles like the diary was convulsing in pain, and underneath it all I could hear voices. Not just noise. Voices. They begged. Some cried for help, others shouted in anger, and a few whispered apologies over and over, as if they'd done something unforgivable. The sound was so layered it felt alive, crawling out of my speakers and clawing its way into the room with me. Within seconds, my head pounded. My ears rang so hard I thought my eardrums might burst. Warm liquid trickled down my neck. Blood, actual blood. I yanked the headphones off, but it didn't matter. The screams weren't contained by hardware. They were inside the room now, rattling the air like thunder. I stumbled back, hands clamped to my ears, but that only made it worse. It wasn't sound anymore. It was vibration. The kind that sinks into your bones, vibrating your teeth until you swear they'll crack. And then my name. Among the chaos, buried deep in the static, one of the voices said my name. Clear, distinct, like someone leaning close enough to breathe it into my ear. That broke me. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving, heart racing like I just sprinted a mile. Silence followed instantly, so sharp and sudden it made me dizzy. For a full minute, I just stood there, trembling. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. A trick of my brain. White noise always sounds like something familiar if you listen long enough. Right? But the memory of that voice, my name in the middle of 1,000 screams, burned a hole in every excuse. The next morning I tried to ignore it, pretend it hadn't happened. I shoved the laptop under my bed and left it there, like distance would matter. But all day, my ears buzzed with phantom echoes. Every time someone spoke to me, their voice warped in my head, twisting into the same distorted wail. By evening, the pressure was unbearable. It felt like a migraine fused with motion sickness and fever. My stomach turned, my vision swam, and I kept catching glimpses of words crawling at the edges of my sight. Half sentences like the ones from the diary, etched faintly into the air itself. Finally, I cracked. I pulled the laptop back out, convinced the only way to stop the noise was to play the file again. This time, I didn't even need to press play. The second the lid opened, the speakers blared to life with another wave of screaming. Louder, sharper. More voices than before. My room shook with it, books rattling on their shelves, glass buzzing in the window. And again, hidden among the chaos, I heard names. Not just mine, other names. Some I didn't recognize. Some I did. One belonged to a kid I went to school with years ago. Another was the name of my neighbor's daughter. Then one that made me choke on my own breath, my mother's name. I slammed the laptop closed again, but the screaming didn't stop this time. It spilled into the walls, rattled the floor beneath my feet, pressed against my skull until I thought my head would split in two. When it finally cut out, silence dropped like a blade. My ears rang with the aftershock, my nose bleeding freely now. I sat on the floor, trembling, tasting copper on my tongue. The diary wasn't just screaming, it was cataloging. It was reaching out. It knew me, and it knew people I cared about. I should have deleted it, but I didn't. The third time I opened the file, it spoke to me. Not in whispers, not in screams, directly. At first, it was just more of the same static-laced shrieking, but then a single voice cut through the noise like a knife through cloth. Calm, cold, clear. It said my name again. Not distorted this time. Perfectly pronounced the way my mother used to say it when she was angry. I froze. My hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling. Then it said something else. It told me about the scar on my knee, the one I got when I was 9 after falling off my bike. It described the wallpaper in my old bedroom, the one with faded astronauts and planets that had peeled from years of humidity. It even whispered the name of the girl I'd had a crush on in middle school, the one I'd never told anyone about. My chest went tight. These weren't things you could dig up online. These were mine. Buried memories, private secrets. I whispered back, "How do you know that?" The diary laughed. Not loud, not manic, just a low chuckle that vibrated in my bones. Then it said, "I remember what you give me." That line hasn't left me. I didn't know what it meant then, but I understand now. Every second I spent listening, every word my brain processed, every shred of attention I gave it, the diary took. It collected me, piece by piece. And here's the part that should terrify you if you're listening to this now. If you've followed me this far into the story, it knows you too. Don't believe me? That buzzing in your ears right now, the faint ringing you'll swear is just your headphones or your speakers. It isn't. That's it testing you. It's seeing how much you'll let in. That's how it grows. That's how it spreads. The more I listened, the stronger it became. The voices got clearer, the words sharper. The screams no longer blurred together. They separated, formed sentences. Each one carried a memory, a confession, a regret that didn't belong to me. At times, I swore I was reading the inside of someone else's skull, their sins echoing in my head, until I couldn't tell which ones were mine. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fragments of text flashing across the dark, entries I hadn't read yet, waiting for me. When I covered my ears, it just laughed and pressed harder against my thoughts, like water filling cracks in a sinking ship. It wanted me to keep going. It needed me to keep going, and against every shred of reason I did. Because some part of me still thought maybe there was an end, a final page that would explain everything. That would release me from it. But deep down, I already knew the truth. That's when I realized it wasn't just a diary, it was a prison. The fragments never came in order. That was the first thing I noticed. One night, I'd hear a child's voice reciting half a bedtime prayer before breaking into screams. The next, a woman muttering equations in a monotone, each number warping into static before I could understand. Then, a desperate plea from a man who swore he hadn't agreed to the upload. At first, I thought it was nonsense, a college of broken files stitched together by some sadistic coder. But the more I listened, the more the pieces began to arrange themselves. Not completely, but enough to suggest a shape, a shadow. From what I could piece together, the diary had once belonged to someone real. A boy, maybe 16. His entries started like any other, talking about homework, about his father's anger, about a strange group he'd seen online. Then his tone changed. The posts grew erratic, more like confessionals than journals. He wrote about rituals, about joining the archive, about voices that lived in the circuitry. He was scared, but he kept going back. And then one night, his writing stopped altogether, replaced by screams. I don't know if he uploaded himself willingly, or if something pulled him in. But what I do know is that his voice wasn't alone. Because the more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just one diary. It was hundreds, thousands, stitched together into one writhing document that kept expanding every time someone opened it. There were fragments about Project K, about a cult that believed death was obsolete if you could transfer consciousness into data. They talked about a digital underworld, a hidden network beneath the dark web, where souls were compressed into code and traded like currency. Some claimed they'd achieved immortality. Others begged to be deleted. The scariest part, some of the voices didn't sound like people from decades ago. They sounded recent, current, as if the diary was still collecting, still swallowing. I started digging through forums, trying to cross-reference the names I heard. A few matched missing persons cases. A college student who disappeared after posting about an online experiment. A coder from Bulgaria who left behind a cryptic note about donating his voice. Even a YouTuber, one of those obscure conspiracy guys who'd gone silent last year without explanation. It couldn't all be coincidence. And yet, the more I looked, the more I felt the diary watching me back. My browser froze whenever I got too close to certain threads. My search history wiped itself clean. And one night, while scrolling through an archived forum, I saw my own username posted in a thread I had never visited. Next to it was a line I'd never written. "We're still here?" That's when it clicked. The diary wasn't just an archive of lost souls. It was a recruiting tool, a virus, a trap disguised as curiosity. And the worst part? It wasn't alone, scattered across whispers in the entries. I heard mention of other cursed files. The video that watches you back. The song that finishes itself. The map that draws in real time. Each one sounded impossible, but after what I'd seen, after what I'd heard, I believed them. This wasn't a single nightmare. It was an ecosystem. An underworld made of stolen consciousness, growing beneath our networks like rot under floorboards. And the diary I had stumbled onto was just one door. I tried to convince myself maybe it was all fiction, some elaborate ARG put together by people with too much time. But every scream I heard carried weight. Raw panic, too unpolished to be fake. Every whisper pressed deeper than code should be able to reach. And every time the file addressed me directly, I felt the walls of the digital underworld closing in. No, this wasn't fiction, and the diary wasn't done with me. The diary didn't stay confined to the screen. At first, it was small things you could laugh off. The odd shiver while scrolling, a line that felt personal. Then the bleed through started. Whispers followed me home, soft as cotton but sharp as thumbtacks. I'd be rinsing a mug and hear a phrase from the file slip out between faucet drips. At night, the hallway felt like a mouth closing around me. Try explaining that to someone and it sounds insane. Try explaining to tech support that your PDF is screaming at you. I told Jonah. He laughed, the forced kind. Dude, unplug it and toss it. Jokes only bought a few hours before the noise crawled back. Words appeared where they shouldn't. A smear on the bathroom mirror. Letters in condensation that read like a note. I scrubbed until my knuckles ached, it faded, then returned when the room cooled. Then scratches. One morning a line carved into the bedroom door, listen. The handwriting wasn't mine. It looked old, as if a fingernail had dragged with patient force. My phone joined the chorus. Calls where no one spoke, only a high keening, then hang up. Once the ringtone played and a layered, familiar, wrong voice said my childhood dog's name. I dropped the phone and it rang again. Caller ID showed my own number. The display rated PLY. I tried to be rational. I set rules. No headphones, no late night browsing, don't open the file. For a while that helped. I even took the laptop to a friend in IT. He ran diagnostics and shrugged. Weird bugs happen, he said, but his eyes kept flicking to the dark corner like he felt something there too. Then the diary learned my patterns. It timed whispers for when I was exhausted. It slipped phrases into strangers' mouths until coincidence snapped. A barista misread my name in the same cadence as an entry. On TV, a reporter's voice warped for a beat into a phrase about unfinished pages. These weren't simple errors anymore. Friends doubted me. Maybe you're stressed, Maya said, take a break. I walked, ate badly, tried to reset. But the whispers rode the subway beside me like an invisible passenger. When I told Maya about the door scratch, she sent 3 question marks, and finally, are you sure you should be alone? The louder I resisted, the louder it became. Attention fed it. Ignoring starved it briefly, but that only made it angrier when it returned. It began inserting personal memories into everyday noise, until I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine. I'd wake up sure I'd spoken in my sleep, then find the words on a post. It stuck to the fridge in handwriting that wasn't mine. Sleep became a negotiation. Shadows arranged into lines of text, breathing occupied corners of the room like a second occupant. I tried lights, radios, leaving the TV on. Nothing worked. It didn't obey human rules. It obeyed attention. It multiplied wherever eyes glanced. I even tried to prove it to someone. I set the laptop on Jonah's kitchen table and pressed play. At first he thought it was some fucked up prank. Then his face went pale. He heard nothing but static, shrugged, and told me to get help. He drove me home and told me to sleep. On the drive, his GPS recalculated and a voice, mine, not mine, whispered a line from the diary into the dead air. Jonah swore he heard it. He stopped answering texts after a week, completely trapped. But then the diary gave me a choice. It didn't whisper this time. It didn't scream. The diary spoke clearly, like a voice across the table. Delete me, and you'll be mine forever. Read me through, and you set us free. It wasn't framed as a riddle or some cryptic curse. It was a choice, simple and sharp, like a blade pressed against my throat. For the first time since opening that cursed file, I realized I wasn't just a victim. I was a participant. Every instinct told me to nuke the thing, smash the hard drive, douse it in bleach, buried under 6 feet of dirt. But the moment I thought it, my screen flickered, and new lines bled across the text. Destroy me, and the screaming never stops. For you. For everyone who hears this story. My stomach dropped. Because I'd already told people. I'd shown Jonah. I'd whispered about it to Maya. And now, by speaking it aloud, by recording it, I've told you. That's when the countdown started. Not in numbers, but in sound. First, one voice began wailing at a constant pitch. Then another layered on top. And another. Each second more joined in, until the audio became unbearable. Like being trapped beneath a collapsing stadium where every soul screamed your name. My ears throbbed. My chest rattled. I thought my ribs might snap. The message was clear, time was running out. I hovered my finger over the delete key. My heart pounded so hard I thought the sound might trigger another scream. I almost pressed it. God, I wanted to press it. But the thought lodged in my head like a nail. What if deleting it traps them inside forever? And what if finishing it unleashes something worse? The diary fed on hesitation. Each second I wavered, it reminded me of secrets it had taken. My childhood, my fears, things I hadn't even remembered until it whispered them back. You belong to me already, it said. But theirs don't have to? Theirs. As if the souls inside were still waiting. As if I could save them. It played dirty, injecting half memories of voices crying for release, children begging, men sobbing, women praying in languages I didn't understand. The more I heard, the more I doubted my own thoughts. Were these pleas real, or tricks stitched together to keep me hooked? Delete, read, delete. Either option promised damnation, either way, I was cursed. The screams crescendoed. The screen flashed with symbols I didn't recognize, loops of text that looked like chains breaking, words unraveling. Every pulse of static felt like a heartbeat, thudding in sync with my own. I told myself I'd choose the lesser evil. But the truth, I didn't choose. The diary did, because my finger slid from delete to scroll, not by accident, not by force, by inevitability, and I kept reading. Every line tore deeper, every phrase bled more secrets. The words weren't just sentences anymore, they were living veins, and I was cutting into them. I saw flashes of faces, eyes wide in eternal panic, a lattice of consciousness straining against the prison of code. And at the bottom of the page, like a key waiting for a lock, one final sentence glowed. So I kept reading until the last page. The last page wasn't written in text, it was written in sound. As I scrolled, the words blurred, dissolving into symbols that melted into black. Then the audio began, no whispers, no fragmented pleas, just a roar of voices layered into an endless, rising scream. It was unbearable, yet I couldn't mute it. My cursor froze. My keyboard locked. The file wouldn't let me look away. And through that wall of agony, a sentence carved itself across the screen. The ones who scream are the ones who read. That's when it hit me. The diary wasn't a record of lost souls, it was a trapdoor. Every person who opened it, every curious fool who read even a line, became another voice in the static. The boy who wrote the first entries, the woman with the equations, the strangers begging to be deleted, Jonah, maybe even Maya. They weren't echoes of the past. They were current, present, screaming because they had seen too much. And now, I was one of them. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound was inside me. My bones vibrated with their cries. My own voice strained, broke, and joined the chorus before I could stop it. I screamed with them, screamed until my throat ripped, until I couldn't tell if the voice I heard was mine or the diary's. It never wanted to be deleted. It never wanted to be finished. It wanted to spread. And that's when I realized the final twist. You've heard it now. You've followed my words, traced each secret, lingered on each scream. That faint ringing in your ears, that prickling at the back of your neck, that's it slipping in, the first thread of its voice unraveling in your head. You don't have to open the file. It's already here. Every retelling is another page. Every listener is another prisoner. I tried to warn you. But warnings are just invitations by another name. So listen closely. If you replay my story, if you whisper it to someone else, the diary grows louder. It will remember you the way it remembered me. And when you try to forget, when you try to convince yourself it was only fiction, you'll hear it again, in static, in silence, in your own thoughts. You want to know how to stop it? I don't know. Maybe you can't. Maybe the only way out is to give it someone else, to pass the scream along until your own voice fades into the crowd. That's how it survives. That's how it wins. And maybe that's why I kept reading. Why I told you this much? Not because I wanted to save anyone, but because I couldn't stand being alone in here. The final words etched themselves across the dark screen, glowing like a brand. Now that you've heard it, it's your diary too. And in the pause between heartbeats, before the screaming swelled again, I thought I heard something new. Your voice, faint but breaking, joining the chorus. Welcome to the last page.